Weebs!
Hey, what up? It's Maddie with SCD.PlayGames. I'm just going to get back to work on my Allarus Terminator here. I did all the purple last time around, and I'm going to get onto the marble before I start doing some of the gold filigree and accents. I'm kind of doing a marble effect on the white here, so I'm going for like a variant Solar Watch look, and I want to get a little bit of like marbling, like striping and stuff on this. So I'm going to do this with a couple of different paints here. So first off, I'm going to try this out. I haven't used this one before. This is Meneth White Highlight from P3. So I just got this from Asset Dropbox. And what I really am trying to do here is basically get about a good dropper's worth, like a good drop's worth. So I'm going to use a little bit of war paint medium, about a drop, and then about a drop of water as well. So it's about a third, a third, a third. So the water and the war paint mixing medium is to thin it out so that it becomes a little bit more translucent when it goes on. The reason I don't use just water is we want it to retain a little bit of the thickness of the paint. And the reason I don't use just the war paint mixing medium is because I want it to kind of create a slight runny, watery effect. We're kind of using this to paint the veins. And I'm going to go first over it with this this kind of darker white color, which has a little bit like of a creamy cream color to it. And then I'm going to go over it again with some grays and blacks before finishing it off. So basically right now I'm going around here looking for areas that I can do sort of thick, fat veins. And I kind of want to leave it on thick enough that it creates a nice vein effect. And I don't know if you can really see it right now, but it'll become more pronounced, I think, as I start putting the grays on. This is just give me another paint to help kind of blend those grays when we come in later with them. Then I'm going to go over with uniform gray here and do the same thing basically. So again, about a drop of uniform gray, war paint mixing medium, and water. And then basically I'm going around the same spots that I just did with the white, but I'm trying to hit a little bit less of it and get it more around the edges or one of the edges of the white. And I don't need to go along everywhere I did white, but I do need to make sure at least the joins where the veins split off and converge, that those have a little bit of gray around them. And we don't want to go too heavy-handed with this. It's supposed to be a fairly subtle effect. And unlike our normal painting, when you're doing these stripes, it's not actually a bad thing to leave it kind of thick on here. Because it's so watery, that thickness will kind of settle as it dries, and it helps create a bit more of a variable, I guess, translucency of the gray color you're putting down. If it's thicker in some areas and a little thinner in others, it'll be darker and lighter, and that kind of helps with the marbling. Some areas you want to do a lot thinner, especially around these really tight details, because it can very quickly just become too much that you're putting down there on these little tight details, and you can just end up with a big glob of gray, and that doesn't look like marble, you know? So we got that gray down. I'm gonna do a little bit of matte black with this. I feel like I'd like to try to get like a tiny bit of blue into it. So I'm gonna try to get a little bit of deep blue in here and hope I don't go too heavy-handed with it. I'll just drop this over here and bring some over with my brush, so that makes sense. And then same deal, war paint mixing medium and water. Grab a little bit of that blue. More of that blue. All right. And then we're doing the same thing, but we're going even tighter on the edges here now. We don't also want to get the black absolutely everywhere that we have the gray. This part is more about kind of accenting what's already there. So what you can do as well, if you're not super happy with any of the lines that you put down, is go back over it with some of the gray or the white, or the gray and the white, and just kind of help blend some of it back in a bit. Since this is pretty thin stuff, it'll look like it's completely covering those lines you just put down, but actually it's going to make them a little softer, because remember each of these paints are really translucent because of the mixing of the mixing medium and water into them. So just kind of go over and, you know, blend in the edges, make sure it doesn't look strictly so much like straight lines, maybe even break up the lines you have a bit, just to make it look a bit more like what marble, you know, kind of does naturally. And then once that's done, I want to start doing a little bit of highlighting. I need to wait for this to dry though, so I think I'm going to give this 5-10 minutes and I'll come back. Okay, so I've decided on my next path. I am going to use some contrast apothecary white paint from Citadel. So this stuff, you'll very often hear people suggest, you know, one thick coat, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that that's a really great idea with this particular paint job I'm doing. So I'm trying to go thinner, and this is really to help me set some basic shadow and depth to my white bits. And basically this contrast is made for painting white models, but to give them a little bit of depth so that they don't look like they're made out of chalk, you know? So you can see already it's making quite a big impact there, which is why you want to be a little sparing with it. So unlike what a lot of people do with contrasts, I am still coming over this at the end to highlight it because I want the white to really pop. So you'll see it's looking like it's getting pretty dark, pretty off-white, but it will definitely be a little bit brighter once we finish. This is the first time I've done this on an Allarus Terminator though. I've done a lot of wardens and guards and bikes so far, but their armor is pretty different looking. Shoulder pads and the accents are really similar, but just, you know, slightly different than what I'm used to working with this painting style. So once you put your contrast on, you've got a pretty limited amount of time to like keep moving it around with your brush and working with it. If you find that you put it down too heavy in one area and you can't get back to it in time before it starts like settling and you risk tearing the contrast paints, just kind of move on and just go back over it with some lighter color after to bring the white back. Keep in mind as well that a lot of the filigree you're seeing, I'm going to be doing gold as well after, so that it's going to make it pop a bit more, but I don't, well, I'm using a different kind of gold paint that doesn't really need any highlighting or shading, so you really want to make sure you get this shading down first with this contrast paint before painting the gold on. And we're kind of almost using this contrast, I guess, as like a wash for it, and a little bit to smooth out the veins that we drew on earlier. So we're not super trying to get it everywhere on the smoother bits. You should, to help smooth out the veins, but the really important part here is just getting it into those recesses. That's what this current exercise is mostly about. Gotta let him dry for a little longer now, and then I can start moving on to the gold. So I'll be back. Okay, looks like the contrast on our Terminator is dried now, so I'm gonna get started on the next step here, which is gonna be some dry brushing. So since I only really need to be worried about the purple because I haven't done any of the gold trim or anything yet, I'm gonna go ahead and use a pretty big brush for this. And I'm gonna start out using Mummy Robes. It's my highlight color. Dry brushing, we're just trying to get a lot of paint like in the bristles, squish it all up in there, and then rub it all out of the edges so that it's not so easy to come out. Because what you're trying to do when you're dry brushing is not use the edge, like the outside bristles of the brush to paint, but kind of just drag the brush over edges and let those raised edges catch the paint that's on the inside of the brush. It's gonna bring some pop back, but keep in mind a lot of the stuff that's getting significantly lightened up here right now is going to be changed to gold. Not all of it, but quite a lot of it. And I think this step is really important because yes, we did put a contrast paint on there, so yeah, technically we don't need to highlight it, I guess, but if you want a really nice, crisp, clean looking marble effect here, yeah, you definitely want to. Okay, good. It's brought some of the color back, or some of the white back. Now we're going for that matte white. It's kind of the, you know, that crisp, clean white. And we want to be pretty sparing with this one because it is super, super clear white. So what we're doing is really looking for sharp corners. And then I'm gonna do these edges up here with that crisp white on the top of the pauldron. Not all the way down, but you know, just the areas that I feel would be really catching a lot more direct above light. But right now, I think the marble is done, so I'm gonna start working on some gold. Now this gold that I'm using is pretty weird stuff. It's Vallejo liquid gold. I'm using the Oro 791 gold. This stuff is actual metal pigment, and it's suspended in this solvent solution here, so it's not an acrylic paint at all. It doesn't really act like an acrylic paint either. You can't use water with it to thin it. You can't use your normal brushes with it either because the metal pigment inside can rust if it comes in contact with too much water. So you have to have dedicated brushes for them. And you also need to have some 91% or above alcohol ready on hand to use to thin it instead of normal water or other mediums. Another thing about it as well is since it's metal pigment, it sits very heavily in this pot and you need to shake the heck out of it, like way more than even contrast paints. You need a good minute or two of shaking. And once you open the bottle on these things as well, you want to use it pretty much right away. Get some paint out, put it in a palette, and then work with that while the pot is closed. If you leave it open too long, you'll start to get big clumps forming in it. You'll have to throw it out. A good way to know if this is all well mixed is if you look at the bottom and you don't see like any big blobs of pigment just sitting there, then it's probably well mixed, but give it another couple of seconds of shaking anyway. A really weird thing you'll notice if you look at the paint as well is the paint appears to be like bubbling and dissolving and stuff. It's really interesting. So I like to get another little dropper ready here full with alcohol just so I can, you know, put a drop in to dilute it, and then at the end, once I finish painting the gold, I've got a nice little bit in that dropper there that I can use for cleaning the brush out as well. as well. So again, remember, you don't put this brush that you use for this stuff in water to clean it. So I'm gonna mix that up since I put a drop of alcohol in. And the great thing about this stuff is the way that it settles is really very metallic looking. While it's a bit thin and weird to get used to working with, usually you'll only need to do one coat of it, and because of how the pigments sit, you really don't need to shade it or highlight it unless you really feel the need to. It's far more metallic looking than most metallic paints, and as such it kind of, you know, catches light and shadow like real metal would. So it's a bit of a weird kind of obscure paint. You know, once you get used to working with it, and you've been working with it for a little bit, it saves you a lot more effort than like shading and highlighting stuff. But you got to be careful with it, because it can, if you thin it too much with too much alcohol, it can get really runny and just run all over the place. Whenever you go back in to get some paint as well, it's a good idea just use the brush to give it a little stir just to make sure that it's not settling at the bottom. All right, so now we're going to go over some of this filigree and fine detail. Another thing to note while working with this paint is that since it's got like a alcohol-based solvent in there, it dries really quick. Once you put it on, usually within a second or two it's dry, and it takes a little longer to like fully set, so you don't want to touch it too much. But if you're going back over an area you've already painted, it's usually done by the time the brush is off of it for the most part. Just put a little drop of alcohol in there. That way it doesn't all dry up in the palette. I think I'll do those chain links in like a silver color. As much as I want these boys to have a lot of gold on them because they are custodians, I think a little bit of contrasting colors helps sometimes. So some silver will be on this model. Oh boy, that's looking pretty nice so far. Just put that in water. Clean it out with alcohol now. I'm gonna do the guy's eyes now. I'm going a bit weird actually. I'm using Blood for the Blood God technical paint by Citadel. Found it's the right level of translucency to go on to this apothecary robes contrast and still look a little bit like it's glowing because the contrast kind of shadows in the edges of the eye a bit better. And then it's red, which is nice and aggressive, and glossy, which is good for like lenses and stuff. So I don't know if it works for everybody, but it works for me. I can touch up some of that gold. So the gold is pretty much done. I just need to go back over and tidy up the white now. Despite your best efforts, this gold is gonna get a little bit on the runny side. So I'm kind of mixing together the mummy robes paint and the Men of White highlight from before a little bit, just to get some kind of medium between the two. And that's what I'm gonna use to go around and touch up anywhere that looks like it needs it. Thankfully, I'm not seeing too many spots where that's gonna be necessary. But around those little rivets, for sure. Those are hard to get done accurately. now I got a little tidying up around the purple to do. For that, I think I'm going to use some Army Painter Purple Tone, because that's a nice dark tone. It's a little translucent, so it shouldn't overpower any of the color that I got down there. Use that around some of these rivets that we bled over into. A little bit over here where I got some of that dry brush from before. Alright, now only thing left to do on this bad boy is the weapons, and I'm probably going to do that in another video, but in the meantime, yeah, this is my marble host. Looks like we got the base armor, all the purple accents and the gold accents done. Last up to do is I'm going to put some black over on this weapon here. These little spikes I'll do in silver, and then the axe I'm going to do with some power axe effect. And then this boy over here is probably going to be black, but I think I might do some metallic touches around there and accents on it. I'll figure that out as we get to it. Thank you very much for watching.
Hey everyone, this is Platonic D, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching our video. We do this to show everyone that your hobbies don't have to be on a professional level for you to enjoy them or share them. We strive to bring positivity to our hobbies and help everyone be more comfortable with just playing and falling into what you enjoy most. Like, comment, and subscribe and all that other jazz on our social media outlets that you can find down below in the description. Hope you join us again next time. And a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. You guys help us out in a major way and we cannot thank you enough. Thanks.
Weebs! What is wrong with this guy?